Hi, welcome to today's video. I am going to show you all of the Olympus pens today and gonna do a small sort of comparison between them. I have 6 of the premium pens lined up, from the first one from 2009 to the latest one that was released 11 years later, 12 years later in 2021. So let's have a look. Alright, so it took me a while, but I was finally able to add the last missing pen to my collection this week. And now that the whole family is complete, it's time to line them up and have a look at how this series has evolved over the years. But before I do, let me explain what I do and what I don't mean when I say all the pens. Olympus, now OM System, but given that the Olympus brand is on all these bodies, I will be talking about Olympus throughout this video. They had 2 main lines in their Micro Four Thirds cameras, which began with the sort of rangefinder style pen series, and later the OMDs, which became more the Pro line series, if you will, with built-in EVFs, more bells and whistles, of course weather sealing later on, so all of that. And within these 2 lines then, Olympus had a few more distinctions. For the OMDs there was the entry-level EM10 series, the mid-level EM5s, and then the pro-level EM1s. And within the pen lineup, you then have the premium pens, which was the EP line, with which it all began back in 2009. And then there's the mid-line pen lights, the EPL line, and finally the smallest of them all, which are the pen minis, which are called the EPMs. So what I mean then when I say all the pen cameras are all of the premium pens in the EP line, which are the EP1, the EP2, the EP3, the EP5, the PEN F, and finally the EP7. This is the pen line that I personally find most interesting. So let's start with the EP1, the original pen. I think it was most common in silver, but there's also a white version of it. So this is the very first mirrorless Micro Four Thirds camera that Olympus released, and it does feel as such. It's a beautiful camera with a full metal body, and at the time of its release in 2009 it really was an impressive piece of equipment in many ways. Now as for performance, the EP1 doesn't quite live up to today's standards. If you've got pretty much, well, anything newer from the last decade, the EP1 will feel slow in comparison, and it does lack features like an EVF or the option of an external EVF, for example. So it did came with an optical viewfinder, the VF1 from Olympus. It has 17mm frame lines, compatible with the 17mm f2.8 pancake that was available as a kit combo with the EP1. The optical viewfinder is bright and it can be used for framing a shot. There is, however, no communication between the viewfinder and camera, so you won't get any information either way. No focusing, the screen won't automatically go black when you come close, etc. But anyway, what absolutely stands is the build quality and the fact that this camera is basically every bit as beautiful as it's always been. Very few digital cameras can compare to it in these aspects still today, if you ask me. So while indeed slow and without any possibility of an EVF, this camera is still really a joy to use and definitely more than capable of making amazing photos. On to the EP2. Now 2009 was a very productive year for Olympus. Not only did they release their first ever mirrorless Micro Four Thirds camera, they actually released 2. Besides a few minor enhancements, the EP2 is mostly the same as the EP1. It did, however, came with one major improvement, which was an accessory port positioned below the flash hot shoe, enabling it to be used with an external EVF. Now Olympus continued its viewfinder accessory line naming with their VF2, which was the follow-up to their optical VF1, but this time the viewfinder was fully electronical. Now the VF2 that was available as a kit as well, along with the EP2, has a resolution of 1.44 million dots, a magnification of 1.15 and a diopter adjustment meter. Now I got myself an EP2 just for the ability to use that external EVF. and I have to say it was indeed a very welcome option. But then again, being used to shoot with the EP1 for years without a viewfinder, I never really got into shooting the EP2 with the VF2 that much, to be honest. I do think the camera is beautiful, just like the EP1, but given that performance-wise it's basically the same camera, it feels more like a new color option to the EP2 color variation than anything else. Then on to the EP3. So Olympus took quite a bit longer with the upgrade to the EP3 than it did with the previous upgrade from the EP1 to the EP2. 2 years, in fact, instead of within the same year. Perhaps that was because in the meantime they launched the PEN Lite series in between, with 2 bodies in that lineup in 2010 and 2011, as well as simultaneously launching a third PEN Lite and a PEN Mini in 2011. But it should certainly also be stated that the EP3 is a leap forward compared to its predecessors. While still equipped with a 12 megapixel sensor, the EP3 did come with a much faster dual-core processor, an OLED touchscreen, built-in flash, a removable hand grip and a revised button layout. A dedicated video recording button was added to the back and, very notably, the sunken mode dial that used to be on the top left had to move to the right to make place for the new built-in flash. The EP3 to me feels like a very worthy successor to the EP1 and EP2. Externally, the changes are very subtle and the EP3 is still the beautiful minimal metal body its predecessors were. Performance-wise, it was a really big step forward and it makes the EP3 the first camera in this pen line that feels like a camera you'd want to use every day, even now in 2023. Of course, it doesn't compete one-on-one with today's offerings, but it is more than capable of making good pictures. It is beautiful, solid build and a lot faster than the EP1 and EP2, allowing for a much smoother user experience. As for color variations for this body, the EP3 combined all of the previous options from the EP1 and EP2 and was available in both silver, white and black. On to the EP5. Now, as with the EP3, 2 years and a bunch of other releases in the PEN Lite and Mini lines later, Olympus announced a successor to the EP3 in 2013, the EP5. There was no EP4 as the number 4 is considered unlucky in Japan because of the way that it's pronounced, being similar to the word for death, is what I read online. Also similar to the release of the EP3 is the big jump forward the EP5 made. A new 60 megapixel sensor, 5-axis image stabilization, both the same as in the EM5 that had been released in 2012. A tilt screen, twin control dials, Wi-Fi and a range of other improvements such as 1/8,000th of a second top shutter speed, focus peaking, as well as a brand new external viewfinder, the VF4 with a 2.36 million dot LCD, 0.74 times magnification and an eye sensor this time. As for the exterior of the body, the EP5 is more different to its predecessor than any of the other pens before. While still very much in line with the retro clean look of the previous pens, some more changes had been made in the EP5. Most notably, it's gotten proper twin front and back control dials with a 2x2 dial interface, as Olympus called it, and there's a small lever on the back of the camera switching these dials from controlling exposure parameters to changing ISO and white balance, and those are also customizable to a couple of other options if that's what you prefer. Furthermore, the small on and off button that all the previous pens had is replaced with a sturdy switch, still on the right for easy access, but a lot less prone to accidentally switching the camera on or off. The mode dial is still on the top right of the camera, but unlike the EP3, where it sits on top of the body, the dial is once again mostly sunken into the body, similar to the EP1 and EP2. With the introduction of the twin buttons, the control wheel on the back of the camera has been made redundant and is replaced with a 4-way control button. Finally, as for the color options, the EP5 has 3 standard options to choose from, just like the EP3. Instead of a full silver one though, the EP5 came in a silver-black combination, in addition to a full black and a full white edition. Olympus also offered two limited editions of the EP5. A black one with a walnut grip and a white one which also had a walnut grip. Whereas the EP3, in my opinion, was the first in the pen lineup that I'd still consider a suitable camera for everyday use in 2023, the EP5 really takes it a step further. The camera is fast, is much easier to use in full manual mode with its twin dials, and also more usable with fast primes wide open, because the fast shutter speed has doubled from 1/4000th of a second to 1/8000th. As for the exterior, I love the classic thin Olympus logo on the front and the slightly sharper lines that give the EP5 even more of a retro rangefinder look. The tilt screen obviously is an improvement, though I have to say that I personally don't care for it that much. It's not something I often use. The four-way control button on the back is perhaps my biggest issue with the EP5. It feels flimsy and easier to get wrong, having you select up or down when actually right or left was what you intended, or vice versa. It just feels out of place on a premium body that in fact just introduced a much sturdier on and off switch to solve the somewhat flimsy button of its predecessors. Next up, the PEN F. 3 years after the release of the EP5, Olympus announced its next premium pen, the PEN F. While not immediately part of the EP series, I think as a premium pen it takes a noteworthy place in this lineup. Besides, there's no EP6, and as for the timeline, the PEN F logically takes its spot. Now, the PEN F is something else in many ways. With a now 20 megapixel sensor, built-in electronic viewfinder, finally, and a fully articulating screen, all inside a partly aluminum, partly magnesium body, it goes well beyond anything any of the pens offered before. It should be stated that the PEN F was positioned as a premium option next to the EP5, rather than its replacement, and marketed as a digital reincarnation of the 35mm half-frame film Olympus PEN F from 1963. With its built-in EVF, something many missed in all the other pens, color profiles accessible through a dial on the front, sharper lines on the body, and a very premium finish, the PEN F indeed feels like an even more premium offering next to the PEN EP line. My view of this camera is, well, somewhat complicated. On the one hand, there's so much to love about this camera, both compared to its predecessors and in general really. The PEN F is an amazing camera, both in performance and in looks. The built-in EVF is great and the color profiles are really good as well. It's the only camera I occasionally use photographs from straight out of camera, because the JPEGs are so good with the color profiles applied. However, there's also a bunch of things about the PEN F that I don't really like that much. Its button layout perhaps being the most prominent. When compared to earlier pens, the PEN F isn't so minimal anymore. A compensation dial has been added on the far right on top, a color profile dial on the front, the EVF with an accompanying diopter adjustment wheel next to it, a second function button on the back, and still that flimsy four-way control button. Furthermore, a bunch of changes were made in the layout and integration of buttons and wheels that make little sense to me. I'm assuming the addition of some of the new options meant that the position of others had to be reconsidered. Apart from wondering whether some of the additions really are improvements, for example, I don't think I've ever used that compensation dial, but that might just be me. I do also think it's a bit of a shame that the beautifully integrated and our sunken dials are now flat on top of the camera. And a practical annoyance, with the compensation dial now taking the place of the on and off switch on the far right, the on and off switch moved all the way to the left of the camera, making it impossible to operate the camera with one hand, something I really loved about all the other pens. And then on to the last pen in this lineup, the EP7. For a long time, it seemed as if Olympus wasn't going to release any new models in the PEN EP series. While the Pen Lite lineup had an 8, 9 and 10 version since 2016, nothing new was coming out on the premium end. Finally, in 2021 then, not long after the Olympus photography division was taken over by Yip and now named OM System, the EP7 was announced. As for specs, the EP7 isn't exactly a leap forward like some of its predecessors. Given that the last previous pen was from 2016, with in between only a few more pen lights having been released, you could wonder why that is. And to be honest, I do. Like the Pen F, the EP7 has a 20 megapixel sensor, 5-axis stabilization and a touchscreen. Unlike the Pen F, it doesn't come with an electronic viewfinder. In fact, unlike the EP2, 3 and 5 from many years ago, it doesn't even come with a port under the flash hot shoe, so there's simply no way to use any type of EVF with the EP7. And speaking of ports, what the EP7 also doesn't have is an input port for a mic. So while it does have 4K video and it would make a lovely lightweight video body, you'd have to either rely on the in-body mic or record the audio separately with this camera. Now, I've only just gotten this camera, so it's a bit early to tell you anything out of actual first-hand experience with it. To be honest, I didn't even really intend to buy the EP7, even though it was the last pen missing in my collection. Between all the pens and OMDs already on the shelf, I couldn't really justify buying an EP7 at its current price point, even second-hand. However, I ran into an offer for a complete kit with the EP7 in absolute mint condition, the 14 to 42mm f3.5 5.6 EZ, the original packaging and everything, for just 425 euros. And it seemed such a steal that I just couldn't resist. And to be honest, I still don't know how a legit photography store had it on offer for that price, but I didn't dare to ask because I was afraid they'd realized they made a mistake in the offering, so I just placed the order and no questions asked. So anyway, based on looks alone for now, let me give you my first impression of this camera compared to the other pens. At 337 grams, including the battery, the EP7 is light. Very light even. With just a small prime like the 17mm 1.8 or the 25mm 1.8 attached, the balance of the camera is already shifting forward slightly more than what feels comfortable. Unlike older pens, the body seems made out of plastic, perhaps similar to what, for example, the OM5 and also the EM5 Mark III are made of. I'm sure it's durable, but the feel of it isn't as premium as the more metal exteriors of the first pens. And I wouldn't mind a little bit of extra weight, to be honest, as it makes the camera feel a bit more balanced with anything beyond a pancake lens on it. What I really like about the new body is that the on and off switch has returned to the top right, allowing the camera to be operated with one hand. Something else that found its way on the EP7 is a color profile wheel on the front of the camera, similar to the one the Pen F has, although this one is a single switch to turn color profiles on or off. Also, the EP7 has a more integrated grip on the front and a good thumb grip on the back, giving it a nice firm grip on the body. To conclude for now, there's some decision made in this EP7 that I don't really get. I guess OM System may have been repositioning the pen a bit, perhaps also because of what competitors have been doing these days. But anyway, I am very eager to start using this camera. It is the most lightweight and compact body with a 20 megapixel sensor and in-body stabilization that I own, and I'm expecting to have a lot of fun using it for both stills and some videos. And I do have high expectation of the quality I should get out of this camera. So there you have it, all 6 pens compared. Now, while making this video, I was wondering what my own favorite was from these 6, and to be honest, I couldn't really say. The EP1 holds a very special place for me because it was my first Olympus camera and also the very first Micro Four Thirds camera Olympus made. But the EP3, for example, is so much faster than its predecessors that it's much more usable for everyday use. And then one step forward, the EP5, it has the dual twin buttons, which makes it much easier to use in full manual mode. And that's something I find very important because that's the way I like to shoot. And also the EP5, compared to the later Pen F and EP7, will be much more affordable to buy secondhand today. So if I would have to pick one today, it would probably be the Pen EP5 because it's so capable, easy to use and quite affordable on the secondhand market. And I'm really curious about your favorites from these 6 pens. Maybe there's one you currently have or the one you had before or one that's still on your wish list. Please share your thoughts about the pen series and your favorites down below in the comments. And hope to see you next time. Bye. Thanks for watching.